Welcome to the eShopper Reviews Podcast, Episode 4. This is the podcast for July 2021. I'm Jenn.
And I'm Jake McNeil.
For those new to this podcast, eShopper Reviews is a subreddit on reddit.com where Jake reviews games on the Nintendo Switch platform, and you can find this subreddit at reddit.com/r/eShopperReviews. We currently have over 1,400 reviews and counting, and we are supported by your donations on our Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. This month's sponsors are Lee, Andy Miller, Stove, Reddit user Wonder Ponder, Johannes, Ilya Zarev, Eli Goodman, and KC. Thank you all for helping to keep the reviews coming. Now on to the discussion topics for today. Our patron-voted game for this month is Mario Golf Super Rush.
I kind of had a feeling this would probably end up getting the votes.
I had hoped not, but I'm not a huge fan of golf, so...
You also kind of wanted me to get to Pokemon Sword and Shield, finally.
Maybe. And maybe steal the copy from you so I could play it or something. Maybe.
Well... We'll bring it back for another vote later on, but this is probably the biggest game to come out this month, so it makes sense that this is our patron-voted game. Like I said, I kind of expected it.
Have you bought it yet?
Not yet. I'll be getting it shortly, and it will be reviewed shortly after this podcast is released. I'm thinking within the week or so afterward.
Ooh, I look forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
So our subreddit has gotten over 7,000 subscribers.
I was really surprised to see the numbers. Like, I just looked at the subreddit one morning and I was like, that's different. And what really surprised me was it just jumped from something like 6,300 to 7,000. And I have no idea what caused it.
I think I might have an idea. E3.
You think that
I think so. I think people wanting to know more information about it maybe spiked up interest.
Maybe, I guess.
Maybe.
I mean, I don't normally do news and stuff aside from these podcasts, but I did do that E3 preview podcast thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, E3 and Summer Games Fest, technically.
Fair enough. News for the last month. Nintendo releases, then removes, then releases firmware update 12.0.3. What?
I don't even remember what this is an update for. I think it was just... Nintendo rarely does major updates for the Nintendo Switch. It's usually stability stuff or little minor features. And I don't recall exactly what this one added, but it was kind of strange in that they released it, and then apparently there were errors with it that were causing problems with people downloading stuff from the eShop, so they pulled it back. And then they released it again, but people are still having errors downloading stuff from the eShop. I've had a few myself, but nothing major. It just gives me an error message and then lets me go ahead and download it, so I'm not sure just what's going on. I know there were people who were speculating that they released this patch in preparation for an impending Switch Pro release, which, as of this recording, we have gotten zero information on, zero news. As far as Nintendo is concerned at this time, it does not exist, but I'm sure we'll talk about that later. In any case, don't know what's going on with this firmware update, but at the moment it is released. There are still issues with it, but not, as far as I can tell, not issues so major that it's causing serious problems for most people in any case.
Okay. Forever Entertainment announces a new publishing deal with Nintendo where they will receive financial backing to launch several games on Nintendo Switch.
So, Forever Entertainment didn't really detail exactly what sort of games they're going to be releasing as far as this partnership goes. They didn't say if it was going to be games within their own catalog. They didn't say if it was going to be Nintendo properties. So, at this point, saying just what this deal is pure speculation. I will say, as far as Forever Entertainment goes, their history is kind of all over the map. What a lot of people are looking at is they have done the Panzer Dragoon remake, and they're currently working on the House of the Dead remake. And the Panzer Dragoon remake is okay, but not great, not terrible. The House of the Dead remake, I cannot speak to its quality yet because it's not yet released, but a lot of people are kind of skeptical about it. As far as other games that they've released, they have ported a lot of kind of smaller indie games to the Nintendo Switch. And again, varying in quality. You have some really good ones, like they were the ones who brought Hard West and Pac-Master to the Switch, and those are both very good games. But they also have some kind of not so good ones, like one that I noticed in their catalog was Merchants of Kaidan, which was extremely buggy and just all around had problems, I felt. So I'm hesitant to get super excited about this deal with Nintendo, especially before we even know what they're bringing. I'd like to think that it's a way for Nintendo to bring some of their more obscure back catalog titles into the Switch catalog, but again, we don't even know if that's the case. We just know they've worked out some sort of arrangement where Forever Entertainment is going to get some financial backing to bring games to the Switch. Don't know anything more beyond that.
Well, let's hope they bring in some good stuff. The next bit of news, which I find very odd, Nintendo asked YouTubers not to co-stream the E3 Nintendo Direct.
This is very odd for any company other than Nintendo.
I was about to say.
For Nintendo, they just have this boneheaded backwards way of approaching YouTubers where they have constantly gotten in the way of YouTubers who have been trying to produce Nintendo themed content. There was their Nintendo Partners program or something like that, where they were basically trying to take monetization away from YouTubers. They've been copyright striking YouTubers just for having Nintendo-themed content. I suppose technically some of the people associated with Nintendo, like the Pokemon Company I know, is supposedly very litigious or very quick to pounce on YouTubers just posting news and stuff. I seem to recall there was some sort of lawsuit that got settled recently involving a leaker of Pokemon Sword and Shield stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Nintendo makes it hard to be a YouTuber that focuses on their content. And it's kind of dumb because it's free advertising.
It is free advertising.
And so this was another chapter in there. Nintendo doesn't understand modern streaming environments and stuff. Like, for example, talking about this, Nintendo basically sent out a message, a press release or something on Twitter, I don't recall exactly. This was like the day before Nintendo was going to have their E3 Nintendo Direct thing.
Mm-hmm.
Ridiculously, like, not even giving anyone any chance to change plans or anything, even if they decided they wanted to. Basically saying, you know, hey, you can put our content on your channel after the Direct, but we don't want you to stream the Direct. We don't want you to be streaming the Direct with commentary. And from what I saw, a lot of YouTubers basically said, yeah, whatever, make me. Which, frankly, I'm perfectly happy with that because I think this is a ridiculous thing.
That is a ridiculous
that they were
thing
trying
to ask.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Nintendo, as far as I'm concerned, you're off your rocker when it comes to this.
Okay, so the next thing we can talk about is E3 stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The Summer Games Fest kickoff event.
So for this event, there wasn't much that was specifically announced for Nintendo Switch, but there were a few games that, at least in theory, could eventually make their way to Nintendo Switch. There's Tiny Tina's Wonderland, which is
excited for.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it
She's
too,
one of
even
my
though
favorite characters.
We know absolutely nothing about it. I mean, is it going to be a shooter? Is it going to be
like Dungeons and Dragons, like it's kind of alluding to?
Well, that's just it, though. There was a Tiny Tina expansion to Borderlands that was kind of fantasy-ish themed. So is this an entire game that has that concept? Is it more of a fantasy RPG that has kind of a Borderlands spin-off-y vibe? Again, this has not been confirmed for any specific platforms. It's just, well, maybe, possibly it'll come to Switch. The earlier Borderlands games did. Borderlands 3, at least as of this moment, has not. Who knows? Jurassic World Evolution 2 is another one. They didn't announce specific platforms. The first one did eventually come to Nintendo Switch.
Was that the game where you, like, run a theme park?
Yeah, it's specifically where you are building and maintaining the Jurassic World theme park. And this is the sequel to that. Out of all the games that didn't really have platforms announced, the one that seemed like it had a really good shot of coming to Switch, at least eventually, at least to me, was probably Metal Slug Tactics. The Metal Slug games, for those who aren't aware, these are kind of action platformer games comparable to the Contra series. They're made by SNK. Really good animation, really good gameplay, but Metal Slug Tactics is kind of different because it's taking that aesthetic and applying it to a strategy RPG, kind of a tactics style RPG, kind of like Final Fantasy Tactics or Disgaea or something like that. It looks really good. I'm really curious to get my hands on it. I don't know. I guess we'll see if it does make it to the Switch eventually. Aside from this, we did get some other news for games that we know are coming to Nintendo Switch. This is where we got the announcement for 2 Point Campus. This is coming from the folks who made 2 Point Hospital, and kind of the same general idea. It's a management sim. Instead of managing a hospital, you're managing a school campus. So
I might actually look into that.
Yeah, it seems like it might be up your alley.
Yeah. I do love my management games.
I do too. And so I'm looking forward to this one. I don't recall exactly what score I gave 2 Point Hospital. I want to say I think I gave it a B or a B+. I thought it was good.
It generally got good reviews.
And we've mentioned this game before, and it's always difficult talking about the company that makes this game, because the company that makes this game is literally called That Game Company. They have, for a while now, had a game coming up on the Nintendo Switch called Sky, and this game finally got a release date announced. Its release date was for June 29th, so by the time this podcast comes out, unless it gets delayed again, it will have already been released. This is a free-to-play game, and from what I've seen in reviews on the mobile platform, it's supposed to be very good. That Game Company is the company that previously made games like Flow, Flower, and Journey. And that is a heck of a track record. So definitely glad to see that that's going to be coming out. I'd say soon, but by the time you're listening to this, it's already out.
Yep.
In addition to that, they announced that they would be adding to this game Le Petit Prince content. I'm not sure what that is or what that's about, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. We got some updates to games that are already out on Switch. For example, the folks at Inner Sloth, I want to say, the Among Us developers, announced a roadmap for content for the game. They're going to be putting out a new map. They're going to be putting out all sorts of new colors and
there's a 15-player lobby now.
Yep. They're going to be adding new game modes and new character types, which sounds like they're taking inspiration from a lot of the mods that people have been making for the game, which is smart. A lot of those mods have definitely added some variety and life to the game that game can definitely use. We had the announcement that Stranger Things characters will be coming to Smite, which is...
That is interesting.
Yeah. Fast and the Furious content is going to be coming to Rocket League, which, okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. You got a car game, you got a car movie franchise. Yeah,
yep, why not?
Fall Guys is going to be getting a skin from Nier Automata, and Fall Guys is not on Switch yet. We have still not gotten a release date for it, but it will be coming to Switch. I don't know if this content will also be on Switch, but we'll see. We got a look at a few new skins for Overwatch 2, which is coming up presumably later this year, I think.
Either this year or next year.
Yeah. We got a new trailer for Monster Hunter Stories 2. Monster Hunter Stories 2 came up time and again this E3. It was at this one. It was at Capcom's press event. It was briefly mentioned in Nintendo's thing. I can't really talk much about it because, I mean, we've seen it mentioned time and again. Suffice it to say, it looks good. I'm sure it'll sell a gazillion copies because Monster Hunter is super popular right now. Mm-hmm. And at this point, it's like, I don't need to see more of the game. Let's just get it out and get it into my hands. We got a new trailer for Evil Dead the game. That's another one that's coming to Switch. And this one definitely has a Dead by Daylight. There was a Friday the 13th game that was kind of similar. It was one of those kind of online multiplayer asymmetrical games. One person is playing the killer and the other people are playing people trying to escape from the killer. Anyway, this looks like it could be good. I guess we'll see. Also at the Summer Game Fest kickoff, they announced a few studios, which was interesting. Mm-hmm. A studio called Deviation Games, and I don't know if it's Coke or Koch, announced that they are making a new game label called Prime Matter. The only thing we know for sure that's coming from Prime Matter for Nintendo Switch is they are going to be porting over Kingdom Come Deliverance. Mm-hmm. Kingdom Come Deliverance, there's actually kind of an interesting story behind this. The creators of this game originally were not planning on bringing this game to the Switch. At one point, the game was, I guess, mistakenly listed on a release list or on a retailer's website or something as coming to Nintendo Switch. And this made the rounds in the news. And the creators of the game actually saw this and saw the fan response to this and were like, there are a lot of people who want this game on Switch. Maybe we should make this game on Switch. Let's make this game on Switch. So that's the story of how this happened. So know that if you ever see a game rumored on some website or something, and you start talking about this and saying, oh, I want this, you might actually convince the folks behind it to make it happen, even if it wasn't going to.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So that was pretty much it as far as Nintendo Switch for this event. That's not really the big story for this event. The big story for the Summer Games Fest kickoff event was we finally got to see gameplay footage for Elden Ring. Not coming to Switch, at least not as far as I'm aware, but it's worth mentioning since it was the big story of that particular event. And as someone who plays games on systems other than the Nintendo Switch, I will say, looks good. It looks pretty much what you would hope for a game from the team that did Dark Souls.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Being written by George R.R. Martin, which, since it's not him who's leading the game, he's just writing for it. Hopefully that means we'll get it sometime within this lifetime. Mm-hmm. Well, we're still up to, what is it, book 5 of the Song of Ice and Fire series?
Yes.
I guess after the show ended, there was less of a desire to actually read the final books in that series.
Next up, we have Ign Expo.
This was one that I didn't have my eye on, but apparently there were a lot of really good announcements coming from this expo. And it just seemed like IGN was making announcements throughout all of E3 week. So that's interesting and good for them for getting a bunch of exclusive stuff. Mm-hmm. First of all, one that I did not predict and would not have even thought about, but in retrospect, it's one of those that makes perfect sense kind of things. Doki Doki Literature Club is coming to Nintendo Switch.
I have no idea what that is. Is this a visual novel?
It is a visual novel with a twist, and I hesitate to say the twist because it is a huge spoiler.
Okay, so don't.
Suffice it to say, this is a game that does some really, really interesting things. I'm sure if you're really curious, you can look it up on YouTube. There are a lot of YouTubers who have played this game. It starts out as a perfectly innocent little visual novel, you know, exactly what you would expect from something called Doki Doki Literature Club. But
and I'm going to stop you right there because I feel like that's a spoiler.
Okay. I will just say, do not look into this if you are bothered by mature content.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
The release date for that is June 30th, which means, again, by the time this podcast comes out, that game will already be released.
Ooh.
Let's see, some other stuff that they announced as far as the IGN Expo goes. A game called Unpacking, which has a TBA release date. Other games coming to Switch. The Forgotten City is coming out sometime in 2021. Unbound Worlds Apart coming, looks like July 27th, 2021. Death's Gambit Afterlife is being ported to Switch sometime this year. We finally got a date for Big Rumble Boxing Creed Champions. It's coming out September 3rd.
I feel like that's something you might actually be interested in.
Maybe.
Maybe? Okay.
I'm not the biggest boxing guy in the world, but I like the Creed movies. At least the first one I liked. I actually haven't seen the second one yet. I've been dragging my feet. This team has done boxing games previously. From what I've seen, it looks like they have a mixed record. They've made some really good stuff. They've made some not so good stuff. So, I don't know. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Skatebird is coming out, looks like August 12th. And it's funny, when this game was first announced, everybody was looking at it and thinking, I don't have Tony Hawk on Nintendo Switch. This is the closest thing. I'm so looking forward to this. And it's been delayed so much that now we actually have Tony Hawk on Switch. So
wow.
It'll be interesting to see how well this one does, given that it's no longer doing this is the best thing you can hope for as far as a skateboarding game on Switch. But it looks cute, it looks fun, and it could still be well worth playing in its own right.
Mm-hmm.
Another skateboarding game that was previously announced was previewed at this event, Ollie Ollie World. A very different kind of skateboarding game, more of a 2D-ish skateboarding game. This event had another look at 2 Point Campus. This is another one where it comes up time and again throughout E3. Sega is really pushing this game, which, I mean, to be fair, it looks like it could be good, so sure thing. We got another look at the Stranger Things characters coming to Smite, and another look at the upcoming expansion for Streets of Rage 4, Mr. X Nightmare. So that is the Switch content I could find for IGN Expo.
Okay, next up is Guerrilla Collective.
So Guerrilla Collective, I had completely forgotten about these guys, but they are the same folks apparently who put on the Wholesome Games Direct. And so they kind of did one and then did the other right afterward. Guerrilla Collective is one of those events where it's just like a bunch of different indie developers and indie publishers
getting together. Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of their way to get exposure.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not to say that there wasn't interesting stuff at this event. For starters, as far as Nintendo Switch content goes, Raji and Ancient Epic, which is already on Nintendo Switch, is getting a re-release on Switch with something called an Enhanced Edition coming out Q4 of 2021.
Interesting.
A really cool looking game called Hunt the Night is coming to Nintendo Switch. This is kind of a top-down action-y game that just looks fun. Blaster Master 03 got a date. It is coming out on July 29th, 2021.
I love the name, by the way.
Blaster Master 03?
Yes.
Well, it's the third game in kind of a reboot series of a franchise that goes back all the way to the original Nintendo system.
Mm-hmm.
I've already reviewed Blaster Master 0 and 02, and both of those games are excellent. Blaster Master 0 is kind of if I'm remembering correctly, a remake of the very first game. And 02 is a sequel inspired by the remake. And they're both very good. Blaster Master 03, I'm almost positive it's going to end up being worth playing. These guys have a really great track record. And we're also getting Azure Striker Gunvolt 3. This was something we already knew was coming. We got a release date for it. It's coming in 2022. So still a ways away, but something to look forward to. And this event also had another look at The Lightbringer, which I think was announced prior to this.
Okay. Next up, we have Wholesome Games Direct.
Like I said, this is done by some of the same people, but I feel like for this event, they kind of try to lump in a bunch of games that are a bit more family-friendly, a bit more cuddly, cutesy kind of thing. Kind of exactly the sort of place you'd expect to see a lot of Nintendo Switch games. And for this, we saw Arietta of Spirits announced for summer 2021. Snacko finally got confirmed for Nintendo Switch. It was kind of one of those, it seemed like it would definitely be coming to Switch, but there wasn't a firm confirmation as far as I could tell. That one's coming to Switch in 2022. Hoa, which had been announced for Switch a while back, finally got a release date that's coming out August 21st. There's a game called Letters coming out 2021. A game called Behind the Twilight Tasomachi coming in 2021. A game called Rainbow Billy coming 2021. A cute game called Witchery Academy, very kind of Harry Potter inspired. No release date for that. A game called Dordogne or Dordog. I'm pretty sure that's a silent G. Dordogne coming out 2021. Kitsune Tales coming out Q1 of next year, 2022. And another look at Unpacking, which I mentioned previously.
Okay. There was a Steam Next Fest, but as expected, there weren't any Switch games announced because it's Steam.
Yeah, no Switch games announced, but we did get additional looks at some games that are coming to Switch. Chris Tales, Ys 9, and Rainbow Billy were all at this one. Definitely looking forward to Chris Tales and Ys 9. Those games look excellent.
Then we have Ubisoft Forward.
So I feel like I'm going to give myself a big pat on the back for this because I pretty much predicted how this would go. As far as Nintendo Switch games at the Ubisoft Forward, I predicted that we would get a Mario plus Rabbids sequel, and we did, called Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope. It's coming 2022, and it looks fantastic. What's really surprising is that they're not just making an easy sequel with this one. They're completely changing the gameplay. Instead of being tile-based like the first game, you get a radius around your character that you can move within. And the visuals in this game look really good, again, for a Nintendo Switch game. But
right.
You know, for a Nintendo Switch game, it looks really great. Really detailed environments, very colorful. They announced some new characters. You know, you're going to have Rabid Rosalina, who's hilarious, even just from the trailer. Looks like it's going to be tons of fun. And the funny thing was, I say this was announced at the Ubisoft Forward, but actually Nintendo kind of let the ball drop beforehand because this was put onto Nintendo's website a day or two prior to Ubisoft's event. So maybe stealing a bit of the thunder, but at the very least, at Ubisoft's event, we got our first look at this game in motion. You know, we only got screenshots on Nintendo's website, and what can I say? The game looks great in motion. And also at this event, we had Just Dance 2022 announced, to the surprise of no one. I personally am not super interested in this game, but I'm sure there are people out there who are buying it, because if there weren't people buying it, then they wouldn't be announcing this every single year. And again, patting myself on the back, I predicted that Ubisoft would have nothing else significant to show here for Switch, and what do you know? Nothing else to show for Switch.
Devolver Digital Direct.
So, as I mentioned before, even if you have no interest in Devolver's games, their Devolver Digital Directs are really wonderful, really well worth watching. I highly recommend, if you haven't done so, go back to previous years and watch them in order, because there's actually a storyline from one year to the next to the next. They're hyper-violent, they're really silly and fourth wall breaking, and they're kind of a commentary on the video game industry itself. Devolver usually has good stuff to show for Nintendo Switch. They had a few games this year. They had Wizard with a Gun coming 2022, and that looks like it could be fun. I think a lot of people are interested in this one mainly because of the title alone. And they have a game coming in 2022 called Demon Throttle, and the really bizarre thing about this one is that they very specifically announced that this one is not coming in digital form. It will only be available as a physical cartridge.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the reason is behind that. it might just be a publicity thing, like a ploy to get people interested just because of that.
Mm-hmm.
The game itself looks like a kind of retro-styled top-down shooter. It looks good. It's just, I feel like the one weird thing about this game is that they're not releasing it in digital format.
Okay, so Gearbox Entertainment, Upload VR, Xbox, and Bethesda games had showcases, but nothing for the Switch.
Yeah, I think this is pretty much expected.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was possible Gearbox might have had something to show, but unlikely. Xbox and Bethesda, I know a lot of people were thinking, well, Bethesda, they have, Doom on the Switch, they have Wolfenstein on the Switch, there's Skyrim on the Switch. I'm sure they'll still keep... No.
I wasn't expecting anything.
Microsoft made it clear this E3. Going forward, Bethesda is their baby now.
Mm-hmm.
And everything under the umbrella of Bethesda and ZeniMax is pretty much at this point going to be Microsoft, Xbox, and PC exclusive. Save for one minor exception, which I'll mention a bit later. But I'm not going to go too much into detail on Microsoft's press conference this C3, aside from to say, I think pretty much everyone was agreed. They knocked it out of the park this year. They had some really great stuff to show. Personally, I will say I can't wait to actually play Microsoft Flight Simulator on a machine that's not my terrible computer.
Oh.
I'm really looking forward to the new Forza Horizons game. It looks really beautiful. The new Stalker game, Stalker 2, is really good looking. Like, this is a game that definitely looks like it's fulfilling that next-gen promise. They announced that Starfield is going to be coming next year. Again, Xbox and PC exclusive. They announced a bunch of other games. Microsoft had something like 30 new games to show, and it all looks really excellent. I'm looking forward to Psychonauts 2. And again, all of this stuff I'm talking about, not coming to Switch, not coming to PlayStation. Still looking forward to it, but gonna need to get an Xbox to play it.
Mm-hmm. Square Enix had a bit of a presentation.
They did. Now I'm going to go into a lot of the stuff that was mentioned in this presentation that is coming to Nintendo Switch was not at that time announced for Switch. It would later be announced to be coming to Nintendo Switch in Nintendo's presentation, but if I don't mention these now, there's not going to be much to talk about as far as Square Enix goes. So I'll just say, Guardians of the Galaxy, this is being made by the same folks who made the Deus Ex games. And this one later got announced to be coming to Nintendo Switch as a cloud version in October 26th.
Okay.
And it looks okay, but I think a lot of people are wary because it reminds them too much of the Marvel Avengers game that Square Enix put out that I will say a lot of people are not overly fond of. They also announced a new sequel in the Life is Strange series called True Colors. Again, later announced for Nintendo Switch, coming September 10th. And they announced remasters of the previous games in the Life is Strange series called the Life is Strange Remastered Collection. And this one's coming to Nintendo Switch in Q4 of this year. They gave another look at Legend of Mana, which I don't think we even really needed because this is a game that it's just a remaster of an old PlayStation game. Coming to Nintendo Switch. Actually, it'll be out by the time you hear this podcast. So that was it as far as Nintendo Switch games in this presentation, and yeah.
Warner Brothers Back for Blood presentation. It's not coming to Switch.
No. And they didn't really have anything else to show as far as I can recall.
The PC gaming show.
So obviously the PC gaming show was PC gaming focused.
Obviously.
But they did have one game that was announced there that is coming to Nintendo Switch.
Oh.
And that is Far Changing Tides. This is a sequel to the first Far game, which I reviewed a little while ago. I actually really liked it. It kind of plays a little bit like Inside and Limbo. You're walking around and solving puzzles, and it's kind of this post-apocalyptic world where you're sailing a boat and trying to find other people.
Oh, that's cool.
I didn't get a good look at this game, but the first game was good, so I look forward to the sequel.
Take-Two had a panel, but they didn't discuss any games. Instead, they decided to discuss diversity in games instead.
I almost feel like they were pranking the games industry for this one because...
Really?
Well, okay, here's the thing. Let me put that into context because, man, I don't want people to misunderstand me here. It's not that I don't believe that women in games are an important topic to discuss. I feel like it's important to highlight gender diversity, both in the hiring practices for game developers and publishers, as well as, making sure that representation in games is okay. But I'm not sure that E3 is the best venue for that when you have a lot of eager gamers hungry for any information they can on the next video game coming from the Take-Two folks. And Take-Two...
I also can't imagine when you would have that discussion. Like, when is
any other time of year. Just put it out on YouTube. You could. The Game Developer Conference. That is a conference specifically discussing game issues.
Okay,
and they
fair.
do make game announcements at the Game Developers Conference, but they also talk about industry issues. PAX Expo. That is an expo where, yes, they do occasionally announce games, but they also have discussions and panels where they talk about events that are dealing with the industry. It's like there are multiple venues for discussing issues facing the industry, and Take-Two deciding that now of all times was the time to go, hey, you guys looking forward to some game announcements? Well, we got a discussion about hiring practices in the industry for you. Okay. I have to feel like there were at least a few people disappointed by that. Not that I expected Take-Two to have much to announce for Nintendo Switch, but I was just like, yeah, this feels like it's trolling right now.
Okay, so Limited Run Games had quite a lineup.
So, Limited Run Games, I've mentioned before, they don't really announce games. They announce, we're putting out physical copies of this game and that game and that game. However... wow, they had a lot to show this E3, and I was kind of blindsided by some of it. And some of these games may have been announced elsewhere and I just missed it, but looking over their lineup, there's some new games that I don't recall seeing anywhere else that were in this lineup.
Okay.
A new Blood Rain game called Blood Rain Betrayal Fresh Bites coming summer 2021. 2 new games in the River City Girls series, which I didn't even think of as a series. I thought of it as a spin-off of, the River City franchise, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But I guess the first River City Girls got such a good response that the folks behind that franchise decided to make it in its own little spin-off series. So Nintendo Switch is going to be the first platform to get River City Girls 0 coming later this year. And they're also going to have a River City Girls 2 coming out next year. So if you're a fan of kind of the arcade brawler type games, and in particular if you really like the first River City Girls, I still need to get around to reviewing it, I know. But if you're a fan of those games, looks like you got a lot to look forward to here. In addition to those game announcements, there are also going to be physical versions coming of, deep breath here, Axiom Verge 2, Contra Anniversary Collection, Double Dragon and Kunio-kun Retro Brawler Bundle, Dusk, Zombies Ate My Neighbors and Ghoul Patrol, Going Under, Haven, Hunt Down, One Step from Eden, Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, Republique, Retromania Wrestling, Ruby Grim Eclipse, Skatebird, Strife, Super Hot, and The Takeover. Like, wow, Limited Run Games had a lot to show this E3, and it just completely caught me by surprise. These guys really hit hard this E3.
Capcom Showcase.
Mm-hmm. So Capcom, once again, was showing another look at Monster Hunter Stories 2.
Lots and lots of stuff for Monster Hunter.
Yeah, and apparently there's a demo out now. I've not played it yet. And the save from the demo will transfer into the final game. So if you want to get a head start on Monster Hunter Stories 2, you can start playing it right now. And if you decide you want to buy the game, you can just continue straight on into the game with your same save file. They also had a look at roadmap content for Monster Hunter Rise, which, again, I predicted they'd do this. They are really supporting the heck out of that game. They want you to know they are not abandoning it anytime soon. They want you to keep playing it, and if you haven't gotten it yet, they want you to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave another look at the upcoming The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, which I love that series, so I'm sure I'll get that game eventually.
Razer Keynote didn't have anything for the Nintendo Switch, just PCs, PC accessories, and face masks.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't know what to say about this, but just looking at their event, Razer is making a high-tech face mask, like an actual, because of the COVID era face mask.
It's kind of late because the pandemic is kind of winding down.
Yeah, but there's still a lot of people who are still worried about that and self-conscious about it. I mean, COVID is still a thing.
It is.
So I don't know. Maybe it'll be a specialty item, but for those select people who really want to get the absolute best in masks, I guess Razer's got you covered.
Okay. The Nintendo Direct had a lot of stuff.
So, a lot of people were looking forward to this Nintendo Direct. A lot of people on the edge of their seat waiting to see what would get announced and what would not get announced. I'll go a bit more into my predictions on this later. Right now, I'm just going to go through, in order, everything that was announced for this Direct. It started off with a reveal of a new Smash Brothers character, Kazuya from Tekken. And I don't think anyone was predicting this. I don't think most people outright hated this announcement, but I don't think there were many who were super excited about it either.
I wasn't.
I mean, granted, I'm not a huge Tekken fan. I'm pretty sure you're not a huge Tekken fan either. I suspect that people who are big Tekken fans loved this. Possibly if they're also into Smash. I'm not sure how much crossover there is there. I don't know. This wasn't a bad announcement. It certainly fits. It's another fighting game cameo, and it looks like Nintendo is trying to push as many of those into this game as they could. You know, they have Ryu and Ken from Street Fighter. They have Terry from King of Fighters. So this makes sense. You know, it's the one video game where you have cameos from all of these franchises in one spot. I just think it was underwhelming for a lot of Smash fans who were hoping for me. Yeah. Oh, I want Master Chief, I want this, I want that, and yeah, no. I still strongly, firmly believe that the final Smash character is going to be a Pokemon character from Sword and Shield. As much as I would maybe rather have someone else, I feel like that's what it's going to be. I can say whoever it is, whoever the final Smash reveal is, it's going to disappoint a lot of people. There's no one character that everyone is going to be gathering around going, yes, this is exactly who I wanted. I'd say the closest you'll get there is Master Chief or Crash Bandicoot. Maybe you'll get most people going, okay, I can be happy with this being the final Smash reveal. However, probably you're just going to be looking at disappointment. In most people, in any case. And I know there are some people out there who are hoping that Nintendo will announce another Fighter's Pass. As much as I would love another Fighter's Pass, at the same time, I can't in good conscience demand that kind of thing because Masahiro Sakurai is so tired. He needs a break. He has been working nonstop for years now. He's been hospitalized. This man needs to have some time to himself, or at the very least, some time to work on something other than Smash. And as much as I very much want more stuff, I want Smash content to never stop flowing. I want to keep getting more and more characters and content for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate until the end of time. But at some point, they got to cut it off and say, you know, enough is enough. This is it. And I feel like we are going to be looking at the end of it pretty soon, probably, some months from now, they will announce the final Super Smash Bros. Character, and that will be it for Smash content for this entry in the franchise. Heaven only knows where they go from here, but that'll be it for this one.
Right.
I believe. So anyway, moving on from the Smash reveal, they went on to talk about the Square Enix games that I've already discussed, the Life is Strange games and Guardians of the Galaxy. I will say, as far as my predictions go, I feel like a dummy for not predicting the Life is Strange games coming to Switch. It makes perfect sense. It's a perfect fit. And I completely blanked out on Square Enix's Western branches, the stuff that used to be Eidos and other companies like that. But yeah, this makes perfect sense for Switch. It'll be a great addition to the Switch library, I'm sure. Don't know about Guardians of the Galaxy. We'll see. They moved on from there to announce Worms Rumble coming to Nintendo Switch June 23rd. In other words, it's already out. They announced a game called Astria Ascending coming September 30th. This is from the same developer who made the Super Neptunia games. We got another announcement that I think might have been leaked before this. I don't know. There was some talk about this. Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania. And I know a lot of people were really happy to see this, not because it was Super Monkey Ball, but because it is specifically a Super Monkey Ball game that is bringing back the content from Super Monkey Ball 1, 2, and Deluxe. And 1 and 2 in particular are highly revered in the franchise as the best games in the franchise. I, in particular, loved Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2 back on the GameCube. Those were some really great games, and the series has never really reached those same highs since. So I'm really excited to see all that content being brought over to Nintendo Switch. It was a bit unclear whether they were porting those games over, remaking those games, or if they were just taking those levels and porting them into a completely new game engine. I don't know. We'll see. But in any case, I'm looking forward to it. Then, another pat myself on the back moment. We got an announcement of Mario Party Superstars. And I told you we would not be getting DLC for Mario Party at this point. And there's too much money to be made in releasing a completely new Mario Party game. Although, this one isn't going to be completely new because it's another kind of remix game of old content. They're bringing back some of the maps and some of the mini games way back from the Nintendo 64 days.
Oh, yay.
Some of the fan favorites from that era, they're calling it. And the funny thing is Nintendo has already done this with the Mario Party games. On the 3DS, they had a top 100 game that brought back what they said were the top 100 mini games of the franchise. So this looks like it's going to be kind of similar to that. And I know a lot of people really wanted to get DLC for Super Mario Party. It needs more content, and it looks like it's never going to get it. I wish you could just buy, even for $60, even for the full price they're asking for this, I wish you could just buy this content and import it into Super Mario Party, so you'd have more random mini games, more of the game boards to play on. Doesn't look like it's happening.
Nope.
And I kind of predicted that would be the case, as much as I don't want it to be. Anyway, this game is coming out October 29th of this year. Oh, and Super Monkey Ball also coming out in October 5th. And then was what I think is what most people thought the biggest announcement that Nintendo made during this Direct. Again, another kind of could see it coming kind of thing, but in any case, people were unsure. Metroid is getting a new 2D game in the series. They haven't put out a new Metroid game in, I think, it's like over 15 years. At least a new 2D Metroid game. There have been the 3D Metroid Prime games, and there have been remakes of old Metroid games, but this is the first time they actually specifically said, this is Metroid 5.
Nice.
And Metroid 4, Metroid Fusion, came out on the Game Boy Advance ages ago.
That is really long ago.
This game is being developed by Mercury Steam. These are the guys who did Metroid Samus Returns on the 3DS. And I predicted that this would happen. We'd get a 2D Metroid game from Mercury Steam specifically. It wasn't much of a prediction. I'm certainly not the only person to have made this prediction, but glad to see it's happening, and it looks very good. I know there are some people who are kind of iffy on the $60 price tag for a 2D game, but I mean, it's a 2D game with a really nice 3D graphics engine. It looks really good. They're going for kind of a dark and slightly scary tone for the game. You know, that's the title, Metroid Dread. Oh, and that's another thing that's worth mentioning. Metroid Dread is actually a reference that's been made multiple times over the last couple decades throughout the series.
Interesting.
At one point, Nintendo themselves was developing a game by that title, and in Metroid Prime 3, apparently there's an Easter egg where they mention the Dread Project or something like that.
Nice.
So this is definitely one to look forward to. A lot of pre-orders are already being made on Amazon for this one. Yeah. So we got yet another look at Just Dance 2022.
Which I might check out.
Okay. Another franchise that I think a lot of people didn't expect to see coming back is making a return. We're getting the sequel to Cruisin' USA and Cruisin' World back on the N64 days.
Wow.
Cruisin' Blast is coming this fall, and it looks like that's going to be a Nintendo Switch exclusive also. We got an announcement that Dragon Ball Z Kakarot and A New Power Awakens is coming September 24th. And we got another look at Mario Golf, which is already out, but specifically they announced that they're going to be releasing free expansion content, including a New Donk City map. So that ought to be interesting. We got yet another look at Monster Hunter Stories 2. Yet another one of my predictions came true. WarioWare is getting a Nintendo Switch title called Get It Together, where you're playing as the actual Wario characters moving around and playing the mini games, which is kind of different for the series. And they're doing something interesting with that too, which is you can play the different characters and they all do something different. So it's like not only are they making a bunch of the little micro games, but they're making it so that you play them differently depending on which character you choose. So that's kind of cool. We finally got a look at the gameplay for Shin Megami Tensei 5 and looks good. I hope it sells well because I know that Shin Megami Tensei, it's kind of a niche series. And this one they announced a release date for. This is coming out November 12th. And they also announced that the Danganronpa series, I hope I pronounced that correctly.
I mean, it sounded like you did.
Is coming to Nintendo Switch in the form of a collection called Danganronpa Decadence, which includes the first 3 games plus a kind of what looks like a board game sort of thing called Danganronpa S. Those are all going to be available separately on the eShop, and that is going to be coming out sometime this year. I don't really know much about this series. It looks like kind of a weird kind of... I don't even know how to describe it, so I'm going to move on.
Okay.
Another surprise here, although I suppose maybe it shouldn't have been, but still, is one of the final Wii U games that hasn't gotten ported to the Nintendo Switch. Fatal Frame Maiden of Black Water is getting a Nintendo Switch port. This is also getting ported to PlayStation, I believe. But still, it's nice to see that this is a game that's not going to be stuck on the Wii U forever. At this point, we're running out of Wii U exclusive games. I think we're down to a few. Like, I know Nintendo Land and Xenoblade Chronicles X are 2 of the big ones that are stuck on the Wii U at this point. And
well, the Wii U didn't do very well.
Well, that's just it. Xenoblade, maybe we'll get at some point. Nintendo Land is probably just going to be a Wii U exclusive until the end of time. That one is just too specific to Wii U hardware. Anyway, moving on. I mentioned earlier that there was one minor exception to Bethesda being exclusive to Microsoft platforms, and that is they announced that Doom Eternal, The Ancient Gods Part 1, was actually shadow dropped during the announcement. That was released on Nintendo Switch the same day. That was kind of expected. I mean, we kind of had an idea that they would be releasing the DLC for Doom Eternal on the Nintendo Switch, but this was the first official confirmation, and it was dropped the same day. And they also announced the expansion pass, so presumably whatever future Doom Eternal content is going to be released, I'm guessing the Ancient Gods Part 2 will also be coming to the Nintendo Switch at some point. After that, though, I would say do not hold your breath for anything coming from Bethesda on Nintendo Switch. No Doom, no Wolfenstein, no Elder Scrolls, no Fallout. At this point, I think we are pretty much done with Bethesda on Nintendo Switch because Microsoft has made it clear this is going to be a Microsoft thing going forward.
Yep, it's their baby.
It's their baby. We got another look at Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. It's going to be out by the time this podcast is released. We got another shadow drop for a game called Strange Brigade, which I don't know much about, so I will move on. We got another look at Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope. And then we got another unexpected announcement, and this one got me excited. Nintendo announced that they are remaking Advance Wars 1 and 2 in a collection remake package called Advance Wars 1 plus 2 Reboot Camp. This is coming out December 3rd this year. It's being developed by WayForward. These are the folks who make the Shantae series. And I know that some people have said that they don't care for the visual style of this, but for me, I gotta say, this looks perfect. They have kind of a cel-shaded anime style. They've brought back the characters from the original games in this new kind of cel-shaded look, and I love the Advance Wars series. I think it is a magnificent turn-based strategy series, and here many people thought that Nintendo had abandoned this franchise. So I am overjoyed to see that we're actually getting Advance Wars again. Even if it's just a remake of the first two games, it gives it another chance to breathe life into that series, and hopefully we will see more of it in the future. But even just this, I'm very happy for it. It was one of my favorite announcements of the whole event. At this point, Nintendo said that we have one final announcement to make, or one final thing to talk about. I don't recall how they phrased it. And then they went into talking about expansion content for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which I think had a lot of people scratching their heads and going, really? That's what you're ending E3 on, is expansion content for a Hyrule Warriors spin-off game? That's odd. Although I think I, like many, surmised that they were going into the Zelda portion of the event, which was still disappointing in its own right, but I'll get to that in a moment. Anyway, they announced the expansion pass content for Age of Calamity. Looks good. You can play as a Guardian, so that's cool. And they gave another look at Skyward Sword HD. They did detail that there would be some quality of life improvements to the game, and it seemed like they were hinting that one of the things that annoyed a lot of people about this game is maybe going to be worked on to be less annoying, which is there's a helper character through this game called Fi, or Fi, I don't recall which, who is constantly nagging you throughout the entire game. Like, a lot of people complained about Navi and the, hey, listen, and this is apparently way worse than that. And it looks like they are hinting that they are going to be toning that down somewhat for this release. They announced a Legend of Zelda Game & Watch, which I think pretty much was expected. Although for this one, it's a Game & Watch that's going to include the original Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, and Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, which is a nice little collection of 3 games for a $50 Game & Watch. probably not going to buy it myself because I already have a handheld to play those games on. It's called Nintendo Switch. But, if you're interested in the little collectibles and stuff, that ought to be fun. And finally, they ended on the thing that I think a lot of people pretty much assumed that they would end this presentation with. I was going back and forth on whether or not they would do this. If they would end it on Breath of the Wild 2, or if they would save that for a Zelda-specific event. Apparently, they said this was the event. They were going to be talking about the Zelda anniversary stuff. So we ended with the Breath of the Wild 2 footage. We actually got gameplay this time. Got all sorts of cool stuff. We got Link using a flamethrower. We got Link blurping through the ground as a blob. It was really cool looking. A lot of cool stuff. I'm not going to go into most of it. It looks like they're going for a Skies of Hyrule kind of theme where you're actually going to floating islands. Kind of Skyward Sword inspired, it seems. So that looks like it'll be good. However, a couple of interesting tidbits here. Number one, we did not get a title for this game yet. It is still an untitled sequel to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. We did not get a specific release date, and the release date that we got is sure to have disappointed some people. It has been dated for 2022.
I expected that.
Yeah, I think a lot of more realistic people did. A lot of people were hoping that it would make this holiday season. Yeah, that doesn't look to be happening.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there are a lot of people skeptical that it will even release in 2022. Some people are thinking that Nintendo is just aiming for 2022 and maybe it'll slip to 2023.
I wouldn't be surprised if that happened either, just because of how horrible this past year has been.
I wouldn't be either. At this point, it's looking more and more unlikely that it'll even be early 2022. So I would say maybe this is one that we should look at being a holiday 2022 release, and don't be terribly surprised if it slips even beyond that. So I said that this was also disappointing in some other ways, and it was disappointing in that there was a comment that was made during this Zelda presentation that this was all they had planned as far as Zelda stuff goes. And I know this really disappointed a lot of people who were hoping for a collection, kind of like the Super Mario 3D All-Stars. People were hoping for a Legend of Zelda 3D All-Stars.
Mm-hmm.
People were hoping for ports of The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD from the Wii U to the Nintendo Switch. People were hoping for a Legend of Zelda 99 like they did, Super Mario 35, or maybe a Legend of Zelda 35, I don't know. But in any case, Nintendo is pretty much indicating that none of that is in the works. Ooh. Now, there's some speculation that they may just not want to talk about that stuff until after Skyward Sword comes out. Because let me tell you, if they mentioned a Zelda 3D collection, a Twilight Princess HD, or especially a Wind Waker HD port to Nintendo Switch, there are a lot of people who would look at Skyward Sword and say, yeah, I want to wait for the better Zelda games, thanks. Like I said before, Skyward Sword is one of the few Zelda games that I have not personally played, so I cannot comment on it personally, but just from reputation alone, this is not generally seen as one of the best 3D Zelda games. In fact, many list it as the worst 3D Zelda game, which is still pretty darn good, but it's understandable that Nintendo might be holding off on talking about other 3D Zelda games until after this one comes out. One other thing that I should mention, getting back to the Breath of the Wild sequel, we didn't get a title for that one, and Nintendo execs have said that a part of the reason for this is because giving away the title would apparently be a huge giveaway for some major plot or gameplay element of the game.
Spoilers.
Like, it would be a spoiler just to tell you the title they're telling us. Mm-hmm. So probably it's something where we'll get a reveal next year, I'm guessing. So it's possible we might see more of Breath of the Wild 2 or whatever it's going to be called later this year. But given that at this point Nintendo kind of has a packed schedule for this year, probably don't expect to see more about this until 2022.
So the Bandai Namco live stream mainly spoke about the House of Ashes, which isn't coming to Switch.
Yeah, they didn't have much to show.
And then we also had some titles that were announced separately.
So just really quickly running through this, there was Ikai coming this October, Monarch coming early next year, Last Stop, which was announced previously, got a date for July 22nd. After E3, Nintendo announced an actual date for Pokemon Unite. It's coming to Switch in July. No specific date, but at least we got a month pinned down for it. And Nipponichi Software America announced a whole slew of Legend of Heroes games that are going to get ported to Nintendo Switch. So running through those real quickly, Legend of Heroes Trails from Zero is coming fall of next year. Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie is coming 2023. Legend of Heroes Trails to Azure is coming 2023. And Legend of Nayuta Boundless Trails is coming 2023. And if you like JRPGs at all, the Legend of Heroes series is definitely one that you'll want to look into. So this is going to be a super exciting announcement.
Shall we talk about your predictions?
So especially after Nintendo's press conference, I sent you a message basically all giddy saying I got so much right. I was super pleased with myself. So starting with the easy stuff, the stuff that I don't think anyone doubted for a second. Yes, we got to look at the Breath of the Wild 2 sequel. I was kind of iffy on whether we'd get this at E3 or whether it would be in a separate thing, but I thought, yeah, probably E3. I mean, this is such a major title, it would be noteworthy if it didn't show at E3. I predicted that we'd get nothing from Next Level Games. They usually take a few years between sequels. Nothing from Camelot, because of course they're putting out Mario Golf, or why would we get something else from them? They're busy with that. I predicted that we'd get nothing from Grezzo because they just put out Miitopia. I predicted that we would get expansion content for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. I predicted that the announced stuff from Binge.com, DVSI Entertainment, NetEase, Otterbox, Turtle Beach, Verizon, Amazon Games, Tencent, Tribeca Festival, Wizards of the Coast, that they'd have nothing for the Switch. These are all obvious gimmies.
Mm-hmm.
Same for PlayStation. Of course, they weren't going to have Switch content at the PlayStation presentation, which, as it turns out, didn't even end up existing at all. Sony is, I guess, going to be doing some separate thing at some other time, but as of this recording, they did nothing this E3. Which, I mean, they said they wouldn't be a part of E3, but they still could have made their own separate thing and said, yeah, this isn't an E3 thing. This is our own state of play. It has nothing to do with that. But they didn't even do that. So, that's the easy stuff out of the way. That was everyone could have predicted that. Now here's some stuff where I can actually give myself credit. And I've kind of mentioned some of these. I predicted we'd get a new Mario Party game and not DLC content for Super Mario Party. I predicted we'd get a new WarioWare game. I predicted we'd get a new 2D Metroid game from Mercury Steam. I told you we would not see Splatoon 3 at this E3. That's something for next year, so they're going to wait until probably later this year before they even talk more about it. I told you, you people out there who did not believe, who swore up and down, it's time for a new Mario Kart. I told you we were not going to get a new Mario Kart until the next time Nintendo brings us hardware. Now, granted, that could be with a new Nintendo Switch. They might make that a new Nintendo Switch launch title. Even that I'm a bit iffy on. But I'm like, there's no way they're going to cut into the sales of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Mm-hmm. That is their goose that laid the golden egg, and they are not going to kill it. I told you that we wouldn't be getting a Zelda 99 or Zelda 35. Even beyond the disappointments of the Zelda presentation here, I'm like, that company, Arika, makes one game a year, and they've already made it. Pac-Man 99. I told you we'd not be getting Mother 3. Nintendo wants to pretend that game doesn't exist, apparently, at least as far as the US goes. I told you we would not be getting Golden Sun. Again, Camelot's already busy working on Mario Golf. They're not going to be putting that out. I told you we'd be getting an anime game from Bandai Namco, and we did. The Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. I told you we would not be getting any major franchises from Capcom like Resident Evil or Street Fighter. We didn't. I told you to expect nothing from Microsoft or Bethesda, aside from the Doom DLC, which I think falls under the previously announced kind of stuff almost. I predicted that we'd probably see Shin Megami Tensei 5. I predicted Mario plus Rabbids 2. Like, so many pats on my back, Jen! So many pats! Do you hear this? That's me patting my back. I'm so good at this.
You did a good job.
Oh, and here's the one no one could have predicted. We got a new Just Dance game announced. You're shaking your head at me.
Yes, I am.
So running through the list here, I said we'd get nothing from Warner Brothers Interactive, nothing but Tony Hawk from Activision Blizzard, no new announcements from Activision Blizzard. I mean, we got the Overwatch 2 skins, but that was about it.
Mm-hmm.
I did say that Devolver Digital would have some good stuff to show. I said that Electronic Arts would save most of their announcements for a future event. They did have one game that I recall seeing them showing off at E3, not for Nintendo Switch. Battlefield, I think Battlefield 5, and it looks really good, but it's not coming to Switch. So moving on.
It's depressing.
I said that Inner Sloth would announce updates for Among Us. I said that MiHoYo Games would not have anything Switch-related for Genshin Impact. It's still way too early for that. They've run into development problems for that game. I said that Psyonix would bring updated content for Rocket League. And I believe I said that Saber Interactive would be showing off Evil Dead the game. Mm-hmm. So all of those were really good predictions that I made. For stuff that I sort of got right, Nintendo didn't show off any expansion content for Animal Crossing's New Horizons, but in interviews with their staff, apparently one of their staffers did mention that they do have more expansion content planned for that game. I said to expect nothing major from Epic Games for Switch. Maybe Fortnite stuff, but apparently they didn't even go into that as far as I recall. I don't recall seeing any Fortnite content. And I said that Mediatonic might have a release date for Nintendo Switch. They didn't, but I did also say that they would have some updated content, and they did have that Nier Automata skin. As far as stuff that I was a little iffy on, but kind of thought might happen, I was really iffy on Nintendo Switch Pro. And I kind of give myself credit for this because everyone else was absolutely positive Nintendo Switch Pro would be announced this E3. And I was like, yeah, but the microchip shortages, I just don't see that as being realistic. Everybody looked at this Bloomberg report and said, well, Bloomberg said it was happening, so it's happening. And I feel like I was the only person in the world who was like, I'm not so sure about that. Yeah, maybe it'll happen. And if we get a Switch Pro, then these other things will happen. But I still it feels like it's too soon for this.
Well, with the year that we had, too, I don't think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, we got nothing for Switch Pro. Mm-hmm. Nothing. We still don't even know if it exists. I will say, I do believe it's in the works. I do believe we will see it, but I don't think we're going to see it until, at the earliest, very late this year, but probably not until next year. So you can count that as another prediction, and if it comes out next year, then haha, I was right again, and haha, Bloomberg, I out-predicted you. Another thing I was a little bit iffy on, I felt like there was a chance we might see a Metroid Prime collection, but no, it didn't end up happening. We got nothing from Freedom Games or Gearbox Software. Again, I wasn't sure if we'd see anything from them. Finji, the folks who make Night in the Woods and Wilmot's Warehouse, well, apparently they showed off that they had a partnership with the Chicory team on the upcoming Chicory game, which might come to Switch, but still no Switch announcement as far as I'm aware. Mm-hmm. Frontier Developments, I mentioned that they might be bringing a new Jurassic World game, or at least I mentioned that they were the ones who did the Jurassic World series. Again, might be coming to Switch, might not. And Raw Fury spent all of E3 pushing this game called Sable. I don't think they have anything for Switch. So, some other kind of iffy stuff. Xseed Games did have Rune Factory 5 to show, but it was mainly to say that it was delayed until 2022, which is disappointing. Yeah, you and I were both really looking forward to that. But as I understand it, the Japanese release of this game was kind of buggy, and if that's the time that they need to polish it up and make it good,
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I say give them the time they need. I can wait for this game if waiting means that it releases good. I don't recall what Annapurna Interactive had to show at this E3, so I can't really comment on that. Dotemu, I mentioned, might have some good stuff to show, and they did, but it's iffy. Okay, they had the Streets of Rage 4 DLC content, which we already knew was coming, and they had Metal Slug Tactics, which, again, don't know if it's coming to Switch, but seems like a good possibility. And I said that we would probably see nothing from Steam, but their presentation did have a few games that were also coming to Nintendo Switch. Just games we already knew about. So, then we get to the stuff that I just plain got wrong. And I gotta take credit for this just like I take credit for the stuff I got right. Hey, I'm a man of my word, money where my mouth is, that kind of stuff, right? So, prior to E3, there was a rumor going around that Nintendo was working on a new Donkey Kong game. This may be true, it may happen, but we saw no evidence of that at E3. I predicted that the Mario Kart team might bring a new Nintendogs or an ARMS sequel.
Which I was hoping.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it too, but whatever that team is working on, we did not see it this E3. I predicted that the Pikmin team might bring a new Pikmin or 2D Mario game. Or maybe even a Mario vs. Donkey Kong, I don't know. Whatever they're working on, we did not see it at E3.
Mm-hmm.
I predicted that we would finally see Metroid Prime 4. It's been long enough, it's time. We did not see Metroid Prime 4. Same thing for Bayonetta 3. It's been long enough. It's high time we see Bayonetta 3. Where the heck is it? Not this E3. We got nothing new from Monolith Soft. I kind of thought that we might see a port of Xenoblade Chronicles X or maybe even a new Xenoblade game, but no. I'm guessing maybe they're just too busy working on the new Breath of the Wild game.
Mm-hmm.
As far as Pokemon stuff goes, I figured we might get something to do with that, and there was, I think, nothing, absolutely nothing Pokemon related this E3, aside from, again, shortly afterward, we got a release date for, a release month for Pokemon Unite. Something I was sure we would see. I was sure that we would see something from HAL Laboratory, the folks who make the Kirby games. They have been talking up about how they're going to be making some major new Kirby game. And I'm like, okay, it's time to see it. Let's see it.
Nothing.
And we got nothing from them. So, I don't know, maybe later this year, maybe next year we'll see something from them. But for now, nope. There were rumors going around that there would be a remake of a Super Famicom era Fire Emblem game. And no, we got... I don't know if we got anything from Intelligent Systems this E3. And granted, we got the Advance Wars 1 and 2 remakes, but those are being done by Way Forward. They're not being done by Intelligent Systems. We got nothing from Platinum Games. Not only no Bayonetta 3, we didn't get any Astral Chain sequel, which I thought might happen. Maybe that was me being overly optimistic. Maybe that was just because I really liked Astral Chain, but we didn't get it. We didn't get the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess ports, which, frankly, I probably should have known better. They wouldn't want to sabotage the Skyward Sword release by announcing that just yet. Digimon Survive was a no-show, which I have to think there's got to be something wrong going with that game for it to be a no-show for as long as it has been.
Who knows?
Yeah. I did mention I completely forgot to consider Square Enix's Western properties like Life is Strange. My mistake. Did I predict anything from... Oh, yeah, I did predict stuff from Take-Two Interactive. I predicted that we'd see the new NBA 2K game and maybe a new golf game from them. And, a new wrestling game from them. And I don't think we got anything from them aside from, of course, that Girls and Games discussion. I don't think that one's on me, though. That's on them. They did something weird this E3, and I don't think anyone would have predicted that's the direction they would have gone. The only thing that they had to show for Nintendo Switch was Ollie Ollie World, and that was at other presentations. Mm-hmm. Also, when I was talking about Riot Games, these are the guys who do the League of Legends stuff, I was like, I don't think we'll see anything from them. And I was completely forgetting that they already announced a game for Nintendo Switch. It's a spin-off of League of Legends called Ruined King, a League of Legends story. And I'm kicking myself about this because this one actually looks really good. It's being done by the same developers who did the Battle Chasers RPG, which was really good. So that was my predictions, the stuff I got right, the stuff I got wrong. I don't know. I thought I did pretty good. What do you think?
I think you did, yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty pleased with myself. I should also mention my wish list items. I got none of the stuff I asked for. Absolutely nothing that I wanted happened. No Chrono Trigger port, no Arkham Asylum games, nothing. Although I can't be too upset about that because I did get the Advance Wars remakes and the Monkey Ball remakes, which that makes me happy. I can be satisfied with that. And we got Metroid Dread, which looks good, and we got another look at Breath of the Wild 2. So overall, I think that pretty much everyone has agreed. Like I said, Microsoft knocked it out of the park this E3. Mm-hmm. I think most people are pretty happy with Nintendo. I think, even as a Nintendo fan, I gotta say, I think personally, Microsoft outdid them this E3. Just the games that they had to show were more impressive in my opinion. Granted, they were gonna be because the hardware they're using is much more advanced. But even so, I feel like Nintendo didn't have much in the way of really impressive major announcements. The closest things they had to it were Metroid Dread and Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, which both look extremely good. I'm very much looking forward to it. But compared to the likes of Stalker 2 and Forza Horizon 5, I don't feel like anything Nintendo showed us was quite as mind-blowing as the stuff Microsoft had to show.
Okay.
Well, I was about to ask you if you watched any of the E3 stuff this year.
I did, a little bit.
Okay. Well...
But I wasn't really impressed, to be honest.
Well, what did you see and what were you not impressed with?
Nothing really excited me this year. And I didn't really go in with expectations either.
Yeah, before E3, I asked what you were hoping for or looking forward to, and you were like,
I'll have years like that for E3 where I just don't really have anything I'm looking forward to.
Well, which of the press conferences and stuff, which did you actually watch?
I didn't watch the press conferences. I just watched, breakdowns of, what was being announced. Top 30 things that people are excited for, breakdowns like that.
Was there anything that caught your eye?
Not really.
Even non-Nintendo stuff, was there anything that caught your eye?
No, not really.
Really?
Yeah, this E3 was kind of bleh for me.
Honestly, I think outside of Microsoft and Nintendo, I think it was bleh for a lot of people. I know a lot of people were disappointed with Square Enix's press conference. A lot of people were disappointed with Capcom. Of course, Take-Two, it's like I said, it felt like they were even trolling us.
Yeah.
Sony was a no-show.
I think it was just, I was not very excited about it because the past year, the pandemic had pushed so many timelines back. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't really expecting much of a lineup this year, which was kind of true.
Yeah.
For me, anyway.
I think a lot of game companies are still clearly being affected by the pandemic.
Oh, yeah. No kidding.
And even the companies that have gone back full steam into regular development, they're still dealing with that backlog of lack of productivity that's been affecting them. So even if they are hard at work on something now, they might not have had enough time to put together something to show for E3.
Yeah.
And that's something that undoubtedly the reason why a lot of the games that got delayed have gotten delayed is probably due to that. The reason why there's a microchip shortage that I believe is contributing to why we haven't seen a Switch Pro yet is because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Probably we might have seen a Breath of the Wild sequel this holiday season if it wasn't for the pandemic. But then we probably would have seen Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury last year instead of this year.
Mm-hmm.
If it was, everything got shoved forward in the schedule because of this. Or shoved back, I guess, is the appropriate way to phrase that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, not exactly the best E3. I'm not sure that it's much of a surprise there. But I suppose it beats last year's E3, given that last year's E3 didn't actually exist.
I'm hoping next year I will actually be excited for stuff.
Well, at the very least, you're getting Rune Factory 5 next year.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I really hope so. Like, even the current content that I've been waiting on to come out for the games I'm currently playing has been pushed back and been affected too.
A lot of the games that Nintendo has slated for this year, I'm genuinely excited for. Like I said, the Advance Wars game, I'm really looking forward to that. I'm definitely looking forward to playing the new WarioWare game, and I am absolutely looking forward to playing Metroid Dread. I just felt like there was nothing that anyone outside of maybe Microsoft that really just blew me away this E3. Well, okay, I'll take that back. Battlefield 5 looks outstanding. I'm not a fan of the Battlefield series, but even having said that, looking at the gameplay for this game, I'm like, I want to get my hands on that. That looks fantastic.
I've played Call of Duty. I've played Battlefield. I just think I'm a little burnt out on that series. I've played it so much in my early 20s, and now it's like, oh, another Battlefield, or, oh, another Call of Duty. Okay.
Apparently, the big thing for a lot of games this year is grappling hooks. You got them in Halo, you got them in Battlefield.
You got them in Monster Hunter.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Grappling hook.
Oh, I said the wire bug.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Here I keep thinking of that as like a double jump because you can do it in midair, so it doesn't parse to me as a grappling hook in the way that I think of that.
Yeah, but it still functions like a grappling hook, so
I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we get to talk about the highlights for the games that eShopper Reviews covered in the month of June 2021. Just note here, these are not necessarily games released in June, but games that we reviewed in the last month. And we'll start by talking about the best games.
All right, let's do it.
So, Doom Eternal, huh? Why am I not surprised?
Well, you might be surprised, given the review that I gave to the first rebooted Doom. I had a very different point of view than most people when it came to the Nintendo Switch port of the Doom reboot. I know a lot of people thought it was a magnificent port, it was amazing, it was fantastic, it was unbelievable how well it worked on Nintendo Switch. And while I will admit that it's a wonder that it was even something they could get to work on Nintendo Switch, I was not a fan of it. I felt like it was a blurry, unplayable mess. Well, not unplayable, but close to unplayable.
That bad, huh?
I don't know. Maybe it was just something about the way that the presentation worked that just did not click with me, but yeah, I wasn't a fan of it. And I know that Panic Button did the port job for this. I know they're celebrated for some of their works. And some of their other games, I think they've done a fantastic job with. I think they did a great job with the Wolfenstein games. Earlier this year, they also did the port of Apex Legends, if I remember, and I wasn't so happy about that. So it was with that in my mind that I went into this review of Doom Eternal, and I was predicting Doom. I was predicting Doom for this port. I know, I'm terrible. Anyway, but I went into it with an open mind. I figured, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I was honestly blown away, where I was really worried about if I would have the same problems with this one. And to put it into context, Doom Eternal on the Nintendo Switch does not look anywhere near as good as it looks on pretty much every other platform that has it. But we're talking about a handheld device. And, so of course, whenever you're talking about ports to Switch, you have to keep that in mind. And I was stunned at how good this game looks, how well it works. And given that this is a very fast-paced first-person shooter, you're moving around all over the place. In fact, the way the gameplay is designed, it really keeps you moving. You're supposed to go from enemy to enemy really quickly to try and keep up the flow of things, to keep getting more ammo to refill your ammo or more health to fill your health. To refill these things, you often need to physically go right near them so you can do one of these glory kills where you get a really cool looking effect for how you're ripping this demon apart.
Okay. My family friendly console.
Yeah, not this game.
Yeah,
no, this is very M-rated. But within the confines of what is possible on the Nintendo Switch, Doom Eternal does some wonders. It is a magnificent looking game, and this is on top of a game that plays really great too. Where I was one of the few voices online who did not care for the previous Doom game, with this one, I feel like it's a completely different story. I will celebrate it. It is a magnificent port of a great game, and I am so thrilled to be able to say that.
Okay, so I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation. Moero Crystal H.
Moero Crystal H. So, this was not something I would have ever expected to be in my favorite games for a given month. In fact, if you came to me some years ago and said, hey, so you're going to be playing an ecchi game on a Nintendo platform, and not only is it going to be good, but it's going to be one of your favorite games that you played in the month that you played it, I would definitely be giving you a funny look.
Wait. An ecchi game?
Yeah, there's not really any nudity in it, but...
On the Switch?
Yes. There's quite a few on the Switch, actually. I've reviewed some of them in the past.
Okay.
But they've all universally been not great, which kind of tends to be the case for most games like this. They use the sexy so that they don't have to make decent gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I reviewed a few games in this series this month. There was another game, Moero Chronicle Hyper, which had potential, but it didn't quite gel. And so then I moved on to this one, Moero Crystal H. And same basic idea. You have a lot of girls with very skimpy outfits and, let's say, well-endowed. And a lot of enemies that are bizarre takes on sexy. Like, you'd have cows with giant...
Okay, so... what was great about the gameplay, Jake?
So let me just say, when I'm playing a game like this to review, I try to approach it with an open mind, even though I know so many of these have been terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And I ask myself, number one, is the game good? Number two, is the attempt at sexy here, does it actually make sense? Does it work for the game? There have been some games where they've tried sexy and it's really off-putting and awkward.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say that this game makes sense. In fact, it embraces how absurd and silly the whole concept of the game is. But within the context of that, this game really surprised me with how good of a dungeon crawler it is. Ever since the 3DS and DS Etrian Odyssey games have had really good dungeon crawler gameplay, I've been craving something that could recapture that and just have not found it. There have been a few on Nintendo Switch that have kind of come close. One of the other games that I reviewed this month, Mary Skelter 2, was decent. Again, had some slight kind of questionable ecchi elements to it.
Mm-hmm.
There were a few other games, and they're escaping my memory right now, but a few other games in the genre that were kind of okay but lacking. This one, I feel like all the elements just came together really well and made for a really fun game. It was combining the basic sort of fantasy JRPG gameplay with there's some monster collecting elements, but you can also use the monsters that aren't in your primary team to boost your main team in different ways. So there's more of a reason to actually diversify what you're upgrading and all of that. There's a zillion different ways to upgrade your team, and it all works together really well in a way that's compelling and actually makes me want to go back into this and grind more. And it's like, even if you're not at all interested in the sexy stuff that's in this game, as long as it doesn't bother you, as long as you're not offended by it or upset by it, or maybe not old enough to really be an appropriate, age-appropriate audience for it, if you're not in one of those categories who's just going to be turned off by the game because of that kind of content, the actual gameplay here was surprisingly good, and I really enjoyed it.
Okay. And then this one, I think I played with you.
Yes, you did. You were curious about it.
Pure Pool.
So, that's another thing I would not have expected to list within my top games for a given month. I'm not big on pool games.
Neither am I.
I've played a bunch of them over the years because I've been reviewing games for a while. But there never has been one that I'm like, oh, this is an absolutely must-play pool game. And, I mean, I don't think that you're going to have your mind changed. If you're not into pool, then, you know, why would you be getting a pool game? But if you're looking for a game of pool to play on the Nintendo Switch, Pure Pool is magnificent. Pretty much the only thing I could fault it for is that it doesn't use the touchscreen or motion controls to add that extra feeling of realism and to actually get you into the feel of the game. But if you're just looking for like regular gamepad controls, I can't think of anything to criticize this game about. Visually, it looks wonderful. It does a great job simulating the game. It gives you tons of different options. It even has a feature that it implements where if you're trying to play online and the person you're playing with just isn't there, it has what it calls a DNA of their profile where it will simulate the way that they play. So you can play with a simulation of them even if they're not present.
Oh, that's interesting. I liked the game for the classy atmosphere. It really does feel like you're in a sports bar.
Well, yeah, and you know, you have a simulated like live band playing, and you even have like, you know, people in the audience clapping after every set, which is a really nice subtle touch. You have kind of this smoky atmosphere where shadows are moving off in the background. The game doesn't have any human characters actually playing in the foreground. The only actual people you see are off in the shadows. And I don't know, maybe this is for the best because it would be difficult to realistically render a realistic looking person. But again, within that limitation, this is a really great looking game. Like even down to the textures of the felt on the table and the grain in the wood of the cue.
And the little puff of like...
Oh yeah, whenever you hit a winning shot, it does a little slow-mo close-up of the cue hitting the ball, and there's a little puff of the chalk off of the cue as it hits the ball that one final time for the winning shot.
It's a very good game.
Yeah.
Okay, your worst game was actually another pool game.
Yes, it was.
Pool Pro Gold.
Yeah. Pool Pro Gold. Oh boy.
What was wrong with this one?
This one, it's hard to tell because I feel like they changed the name or something of it, but I'm pretty sure that this is a port of a mobile game, and there's so much wrong with it. For starters, you would think that it being a port of a mobile game, that it would have touchscreen controls. No.
Yes, it didn't.
No. There's no touchscreen controls. There are no motion controls. In fact, just about any kind of control scheme that you would expect to find in a pool video game, don't expect that here. Instead, you are using the trigger buttons on the ZL and ZR button on the Nintendo Switch to change the angle that you're hitting the ball in, you know, the angle you're aiming. And then you have, like, in golf video games, you'd have a bar that fills up and goes down to determine how hard you hit the ball. They do something like that here, too. But it's like, there's no way to change your aimings in a subtle way. So if you just want to change to be just a little bit to the right, too bad. You have to like quickly tap the shoulder button, the ZL or ZR. And if you go too far, you have to tap it the other way. And while you're fiddling with the horrible controls that this game has, there is a countdown clock ticking down. And if you take too long to try and actually aim your shot with the terrible controls this game has, it just automatically concedes your turn and it goes to the computer player. And it is very specifically going to the computer player because this game does not have any multiplayer features.
That's horrible.
Yeah, so this pool game looks cheap. It looks like a mobile game. It plays terribly. The controls are terrible. There aren't many options. There's no multiplayer features. And then, even above and beyond how it fails to be a bare minimum of a decent experience, it actually punishes you for trying to wrestle with the terrible controls by giving you this pointless time limit. Like you're wasting the computer's time or something. It's just, oh. I've played lackluster pool games. I've never played one that was just so, like, there's no reason why it had to be as bad as it was. It was like they were trying to make this a bad game almost.
Okay. The next one, the title is basketball.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Basketball.
If memory serves, this comes from Seibek, because this company, if I'm recalling correctly, puts out a bunch of games with the most bland, generic names that you could possibly put on games.
That's awful.
You know what? It is what it is. It's fine. If a game has a bland, generic name, I mean, I can't imagine that helps it to sell well, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad game. But this was a bad game. Once again, terrible controls, and this one is inexplicable in that it will wrest control away from the player and toss you, like when you're controlling one character, it'll toss you from character to character without you telling it to, and without any kind of sensibility about it. It doesn't have to do with which character is closest to the ball. It doesn't have to do with you're trying to block a shot. Or I could not for the life of me figure out why it kept making me play completely different players on the team. And the only time that it doesn't seem to do this is if you're actually in control of the ball. And the funny thing is as terrible as the controls in this game are, the moment you're in control of the ball, you can't lose. You go faster than the players on the computer-controlled team. So you can run circles around them, go over to the other, to the basket, and shoot at ease. So it's a game that controls terribly, and it tries to compensate for that by making it way too easy. And again, just like with Pool Pro Gold, this is a game where it is only one player. And I feel like right off the bat, if you're making a sports game that doesn't have multiplayer, unless there's some specific reason why, you're doing it wrong.
Okay. Animal Fight Club.
Animal Fight Club is odd. I don't quite know what they were going for with this. This is a case of they're clearly doing something experimental and different, and I can't fault them for that, but the actual game that it resulted in is like, I just don't see a point to it. You create mutant animals that are like combinations of different, you can make a giraffe dog or different things like that.
Yeah.
And then you have your army of mutant animals fight a computer-controlled army of mutant animals. But it's like a slap fight where you're just whittling down each other's health. I will say there is some amusement to be had from this game, seeing all the weird animals that you can create in it. But I just don't see much fun coming from the gameplay. It's a, that's kind of funny sort of thing. Now I'll move on and actually play something.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see much of a point to this game.
Okay. And then the last one is My Secret Pets.
Oh boy. This game is a visual novel. It's funny, both My Secret Pets and Animal Fight Club were games that I played for the Cute and Fuzzy week.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't end up including them in that week because both of them didn't quite seem to fit that theme. Animal Fight Club because, you're fighting with the animals.
Nah.
And this one because it's not about the... how do I even begin with this game? So this is a visual novel. In the, I think we've said it's called the Otome style. You know, kind of the girl with the harem of guys who's pining after her. But in this case, the harem of guys who is pining after her are all of her various pets who have transformed into attractive men.
Oh, yes, you were telling me
and
about this.
Okay, so the game doesn't really introduce her very well. It doesn't introduce her relationship to any of these pets before they transform. It starts the game with her getting dumped by her boyfriend for reasons that are not made clear. And then she goes home to cry about it to her dog. The one animal in the entire game that gets any kind of introduction or that we see at all before this transformation doesn't actually transform. Her dog remains a dog. But all of her other pets, it's weird in and of itself that this game seems to be playing to a fantasy that a girl might have, that one morning she'll wake up and all of her various pets will have turned into hot guys who will be fighting over her affections in kind of slightly almost rapey ways.
Oh, great.
I just, I don't hate this genre, the otome genre.
I don't either.
I try to make that clear whenever I come up to it. If it's a game about a girl who is pining for the affections of various guys, or various guys are surrounding her and trying to win her over, granted, I understand that's not for me. It's not a game that is I'm not the target audience. But I can still look at that in the context of, okay, if I was the target audience, would this work for me? And I'm just looking at this game being like, who is this for? I mean, maybe there is some girl out there who's looking at her pet bunny going, man, I wish you were a man because the things I would do to you. But I can't imagine that's many people. I don't get it. I don't. And okay, even in the context of, let's say that I was this mythical person who really, really was into that fantasy, it's still missing basic stuff like introductions to the characters, basic stuff. Who is this girl that we're supposed to be putting ourselves into the headspace of, who's finding herself in this weird situation? And what is her relationship to these pets before this weird transformation that, of course, isn't explained happens?
Yeah.
And it's so weird, and not in a fun way, but in an unsettling, and again, who is this for kind of way.
Okay. Hidden gems.
Yes.
Super Tennis Blast.
So, I played a lot of sports games over the last month. Well, for the sports game week thing that I did. And in the past, I've reviewed some good tennis games. I was not quite so enamored with Mario Tennis. There was one tennis game that it's escaping my mind now, but it had really good motion controls for those who are looking for something more like a Wii Sports sort of thing. This game is kind of more of a just all-around good traditional tennis game with just good gamepad controls. And I think I found myself saying, I think if I'm looking for a tennis game that doesn't have motion controls, that just uses traditional gamepad controls, this is probably the best game like that I've played since Sega was making the Virtua Tennis series.
Okay.
Man, I missed the Virtua Tennis games, but this one's a bit more cartoony. The animation could use some work. It's definitely not visually impressive, but the gameplay controls really well. It has a lot of content, a lot of little mini games and stuff. Just overall, I thought this was an excellent game of tennis. So for someone looking for a good tennis game on the Nintendo Switch, this is definitely one I'd recommend to them.
Okay. Tell me about Retrograde Arena.
Retrograde Arena it's interesting. This is one that came out on Nintendo Switch without much fanfare, despite that this is a free-to-play game. There were actually a lot of free-to-play games that I reviewed this month, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But Retrograde Arena is a two-stick shooter with kind of retro-style, simplistic 80s graphics with kind of a vector graphics-y look almost.
Mm-hmm.
But they are 3D visuals. They're just kind of designed to be stylized that way. But the gimmick behind this one is that rather than going around and shooting enemies and destroying them by shooting them, shots in this game don't kill. What they do is they push your enemies away from you. And you're trying to push enemies into red walls that destroy them. However, there's another element to this, which is that every shot you fire doesn't just push whoever you hit, it also pushes you back. So it takes some getting used to the way the physics in this game work. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to push enemies away and into, zones where they can, hit a wall and get killed.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you also need to be mindful that you're not shooting yourself away into a wall where you can get killed too.
Okay.
It's a really unique kind of spin on the genre, and it might not be for everyone, but the beautiful part of that is if it's not for you, you haven't wasted any money trying it, it's free to play.
Oh, hey. All right, that's good. Okay. Golf Zero.
Golf Zero was one of the games that I reviewed for my sports game week, but it is not actually really something I would consider a sports game. This is more of a platformer, a 2D platformer. And technically it has golf as a bit of a motif, but it only loosely resembles the actual sport. The idea is you are trying to hit a ball into a cup, much like golf. But the levels are kind of crazy and there's all kinds of weird platforming stuff. And you're not stuck hitting the ball from wherever you last hit it. You can hit it from wherever. You can even jump and hit the ball in midair.
Mm-hmm.
And so the challenge is trying to get your character to a point where he can hit the ball into the cup. It's a challenging platformer. It's not going to be for everyone, but it's a really unique take on the genre, and it was really inventive, and I thought it was pretty fun.
Okay. And then the last one, which I love the title, Super Inefficient Golf.
So this one is kind of a mini golf game, but it takes a different approach to the genre. Instead of hitting the ball with a club, you are attaching miniature rockets to the ball. And you are determining the power of your hit and the direction that it's hit by where you place these rockets. During any hit, you can place 4 rockets, little mini rocket discs, on the ball. And they have different colors, so you can trigger them at different times. Like, you hit one button to trigger the blue rockets, and then another button to trigger the red rockets.
Mm-hmm.
And using these, you need to kind of figure out how to aim and get your ball to the hole, much like in a traditional golf game. But you can do all kinds of wacky things, like you can trigger your rockets to hit the ball in one direction, and then while it's in midair, you can trigger another set of rockets to have it suddenly jet off into another direction. And I thought it was really fun in this game trying to find ways to exploit these rockets to get a hole in one or to get yourself quickly to the goal in creative ways. I thought it was really fun.
All right. So you have other noteworthy reviews. This one I think I played with you, Pushy and Pulley in Blockland.
Yeah, Pushy and Pulley was a game that I say it's noteworthy because this is a game that we were provided a review code for.
Yay.
And this is kind of a top-down arcadey sort of game. I compared it to Kickle Cubicle and the Adventures of Lolo games, where you're pushing blocks to try and defeat enemies, and it kind of has you thinking about where you're pushing stuff, and also if blocks of the same color match, then they clear and you get a special bonus of some sort. I thought this one was decent. I think that some of the issues I had with it were the controls were a bit stiff, and the time limits that each of the levels had felt like they might be a bit frustrating for some players. I really wish that was more of an optional thing.
Okay.
But I thought it was fun, and I appreciate the publisher giving me a review code, so felt it deserved a mention here.
It was fun.
I try not to show favoritism in my reviews, but I feel like if they're going to go to the trouble to provide me with a game, I should mention it here. Also, in the sake of full disclosure, so everybody knows, and they can accuse me of bias if they want or not. I don't know.
Famicom Detective Club, The Missing Heir, and The Girl Who Stands Behind.
So this was the game that Patreon voters chose for the previous month's vote. And these are two visual novel style games. As I mentioned previously, they are actual remakes of Famicom games, the original Nintendo Entertainment System as it was in Japan. And they're very good remakes. I feel like the actual games themselves suffer a bit because the gameplay hasn't aged so well. You're often trying to scan the area, trying to find just what it is you're supposed to interact with. Anyway, I thought it was decent, but not really noteworthy enough to list in any of my main categories here.
Okay, that's a shame, in a sense. So you also have a list of free-to-play games in your noteworthy reviews.
Yeah, I just felt like I reviewed so many free-to-play games this month that it bared some mention here. The list that I have is Emergency HQ, Fighting EX Layer, Super Bomberman R Online, Cursed FOAD, Knockout City, and Retrograde Arena, which I've already mentioned here. And some of these games were decent or showed promise, some of them not so much. Retrograde Arena I thought was really good. I think Emergency HQ was too microtransaction-y. I didn't think it was all that great. Fighting EX Layer was kind of a somewhat generic fighting game. It wasn't spectacular. Super Bomberman R Online I liked, but I feel like it has problems with loading times that really drag down the pace of the game. Cursed FOAD. Oh, I like this game so much, but I cannot play it on the Nintendo Switch. It is such an eyesore. The resolutions are so terrible. It actually almost gets to the point where it hurts my eyes to play this game. And I like the idea of it. It's kind of like a PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds sort of battle royale style game. And it has some unique features, like you have spirit animal powers, and it has vehicles that you can hop into and use to run over opponents. And, you know, it has a wide variety of weapons and power-ups and stuff. And I like so much about this game, but I just can't stand playing it on the Nintendo Switch. It is just not a good port. Knockout City, which I liked, I feel like it just felt a bit too hectic for me. I think, unlike the last game I mentioned, Knockout City is an excellent port on Nintendo Switch, and I commend the folks at Electronic Arts and Valan Studios who developed this game. They were the guys who made Mario Kart Home Tour, the one with the remote-controlled car. So clearly they know what they're doing on Nintendo Switch, and they did a really excellent job making this game work well on Nintendo Switch. I just felt like the gameplay was too chaotic for me to really get pulled into it. So those are kind of what I thought of all the free-to-play games I played this month.
Okay. Now we're going to go on to some patron-submitted questions. Anyone who donates on Patreon can have their questions answered in the monthly podcast. And this month, our first question comes from an anonymous patron who asks, are you following all these Switch Pro rumors? What would you want in a Switch Pro model?
I do follow the Switch Pro rumors, although I think you kind of can tell from the way I've spoken about it here. I also take them a bit with a grain of salt. Like even the whole Bloomberg report that came out recently, I felt like that was jumping to conclusions. And I do believe there is a Nintendo Switch Pro or something along those lines in the works, because Nintendo always does iterations on their handheld hardware, and it only just makes sense. I don't think we're likely to see it particularly soon, just because of the state of like microchips or the transistors or whatever. There's a hardware shortage right now, so it would be difficult for them to manufacture the thing. But even beyond that, I feel like the timing might not be quite so right. I'm thinking maybe we'll see it next year, like I said. But I do watch these rumors, and sometimes I will give a rumor more credence than others, especially if it seems to be coming from a reliable source. I've actually seen some of Bloomberg's rumors not quite come to fruition before, which is part of the reason why I'm like, maybe not.
Oh.
As far as what I would like from a Nintendo Switch Pro, I mean, some of the obvious answers are obvious answers. I want folders. I'd really like to be able to sort and store my games in a way that actually makes sense rather than having to go through the entire library of them if they're not in one of the last 10 or so games that I played. I would like, well, I think everyone would like them to fix the drifting problem, although I don't think that's likely to happen. They're going to want to continue using the same Joy-Cons with whatever Nintendo Switch stuff they come up with, and since they have not fixed that problem yet, they're not likely to fix it. I would like for them to have built-in support for Bluetooth headsets. It's kind of inexplicable that they don't do that, really, especially since it's a handheld modern game system. Why does it not support Bluetooth headsets? That doesn't make sense to me. These are all kind of obvious complaints. Fix the online. Of course, hey, it would be nice to see something with hardware that boosts the performance of old Switch games, in particular games that we know have performance issues, like Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity had some serious frame rate hitches. Even Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild had places where the frame rates really noticeably dropped, and it would be nice if new hardware could actually go back and address those frame rate issues in older games. Mm-hmm. Or give developers a tool where they could switch on a higher graphics mode to take advantage of better hardware. But in terms of me personally, if I wasn't just going off of what everyone's saying and I agree with, something that I would personally really like to see, I want something in the Nintendo Switch Lite kind of size and weight and that kind of form factor that will dock. I want to have an actual Nintendo Switch that I can fit in my pocket and connect to my TV. I don't necessarily think this is what we're going to get in a Nintendo Switch Pro, but it is what I would want. I mean, heck, if they were to make a Nintendo Switch Pro and a Nintendo Switch Lite Pro, if they just made a Nintendo Switch Lite that added that one feature, that would probably become my new Nintendo Switch.
Wow.
Because I like the idea of a handheld system that I can plug into my TV and play and then take on the go with me. And right now, I don't believe, for me, any of the Nintendo Switch systems that are currently on the market do that for me. I think that the standard Nintendo Switch is too big to be... I mean, it's technically portable, but it doesn't feel like a handheld system in the same way that the Nintendo Game Boy or DS or, any of those systems
Agreed.
did. And likewise, the Switch Lite, which I haven't gotten hands on personally, but I've heard is much more in line with that kind of idea, but it doesn't dock with the TV, which kind of defeats that part of the purpose of it for me. And I'm not knocking the Switch Lite. I'm not saying there's no reason for it to exist. Clearly there is. There are a lot of people who've enjoyed it. There are a lot of people who only play their game in handheld mode, and I get that. Me, I play my games mostly in docked mode, and I might occasionally want to bring the Nintendo Switch on the go with me. And this system is so big and bulky and heavy that I don't feel like I can do that safely without bringing a carrying case or something as well. And it's certainly not going to fit in my pocket.
All right. So that's the only question we have for this month. If you'd like to have your question read aloud on this podcast, donate any amount on our Patreon page and submit a question on our monthly call out, and we will bring it up on our next podcast. And that wraps things up for this month's eShopper Reviews podcast. Again, we want to thank all of our patrons on Patreon for contributing. Patreon donors are the first ones to gain access to these podcasts, and if you're interested in becoming a donor, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. And once again, if you're curious to read any of the reviews or content mentioned in this podcast, you can find it on the eShopper Reviews subreddit at reddit.com/r/eShopperReviews. Once again, this has been Jenn
and Jake McNeil.
We'll see you next month, and in the meantime, we both hope you found this content helpful and enjoyed some good games. Catch you next time.